It's time Europe's Brexit negotiators got down to business. That's what David Davis, the man leading the negotiations, has said, and this morning that is what they will start to do. So far it's been relatively harmonious, mostly about procedures, but now it's down to the nitty-gritty, the rights of EU citizens to live here after Brexit and vice versa, the future of the Irish border, the cost of the divorce, how much we should pay to leave the Union, etc., etc. Let's talk about those issues, or at least some of them, with former Cabinet Minister Owen Paterson, Conservative MP, and Aleš Kamala, the Secretary of State for European Affairs in the Czech government. Owen Paterson, I mention the cost of the divorce. How much should we pay, if anything? Because some of your colleagues believe, to coin the phrase that they have used, they can go whistle if they want money from us. Do you share that view?
Well, good morning, John.
Morning.
Well, we have a long history, with the exception of Edward III, who dumped on the Bardi and Peruzzi bankers in Florence back in the 1340s. We honour our legal obligations, and I think the UK government will scrutinise in real detail what our ongoing legal obligations are, and we will pay those. And I think then there are areas where we will continue to collaborate. So there are programmes which are very popular, like Erasmus and Horizon. I can see us continuing to contribute to those. And something like CERN, where we are the second biggest contributor, that was begun before the European community was created. We were contributing then. We're still the second largest contributor as members of the European Union.
So what do you reckon all
that
what do you reckon all that would add up to? I mean, are we talking about a couple of $100 billion or what?
Honestly, we have no idea until
Really?
the lawyers sit down and work it out. But I think there's one area where the happy phrase whistle comes in, and that is access to the market. The United States, Japan, Australia, they do not pay for access to the market. Normally, if you pay for access, you pay a tariff. And we don't want to have tariffs. We want to have reciprocal free trade. So that is one area where I think emphatically we will not want to pay anything.
Not even if it means we lose a great deal of trade as a result of it, which of course is the possibility.
We just pay a tariff, which of course will hit them harder because they have this massive surplus with us. Last year they had a surplus of 71.8 billion. The Germans sold us 950,000 cars. So it's absolutely in everyone's interest that we get a reciprocal free trade deal and we don't go near tariffs. But it's a complete nonsense that we, as an independent sovereign nation, with the same level standing as countries like the United States, Australia or Japan, as I mentioned, should pay something. I also think it would probably be against WTO rules anyway, because they'd be discriminatory.
I mean, there is a difference, of course. 40% of our trade, 70% of theirs. You know, we need them more than they need us. That's putting it crudely.
Well, no, John, I don't agree. I think the boot is actually firmly on the other foot. The proportion of our trade to them has tumbled from 61% in 99 to 45% today, and it's going to go to 35%, whereas we have this massive surplus with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is the future for us. We want the best possible relations with our European neighbours going on, and the obvious answer is reciprocal free trade, but you don't have to pay to do that unless you have a tariff arrangement.
Right. Aleš Kamala, do you accept that that is the case? We don't have to pay to do trade with you?
Well, I think the position that we are starting from is actually very clear. There have been certain decisions and commitments that were made with a view of a European Union at 28. And financial settlement, much like the rest of the Brexit negotiations, is not the means of punishing the UK, or it's not a direct deal with the access to the market. It is a means of literally making the goal of reaching a mutually agreeable settlement for outstanding financial issues. So this is not a one-way street. Both parties have commitments towards the other one, and commitments have to be somehow settled.
But those commitments end when we leave the market, when we leave the European Union.
Well, we still hope that there will be a mutually agreeable settlement also on trade issues, and we also hope that the UK will have a specific access to the European market. That's something that we have negotiated, for example, now with Canada. It can be much broader, it can be much deeper. And if it is deeper than other settlements, than other trade deals, then it is understandable that there will be also a certain commitment. But
such as? I mean, what do you mean by that? When you say there'd be certain commitments, I mean, what would it cost us? And I'm not quite sure that I'm clear what you mean by deeper deals. What do you mean by that?
Well, now we're in the first phase. What we talk about and what was a partially part of your interview before was actually about the future. Now we're dealing with the legacy issues. It means what has been already committed and what somehow has to be settled. And in this, there is a lot of work to be done. We need, in October, so-called substantial progress in those terms, and we need to see and set at least a methodology on how much and in what areas we can actually have to settle,
right,
and what commitments have to be settled.
But what you're saying, Owen Paterson, is that there will be no commitment to be settled in this specific and hugely important area.
No, John, that's not quite fair. I said right at the beginning we will honour our legal obligations, and they have to be listed in detail. And I said we would continue, as the white paper said, appropriate contributions to programmes which we continue to participate in.
Yes, but
and I would suggest Erasmus or Horizon.
Yes, but you specifically excluded trade.
Absolutely. Because if you want to pay for access to a market, you pay a tariff. Now, for us, actually, we would raise far more in tariffs than the European would raise on us because of this massive surplus the European Union has with us. So I totally agree with Mr. Kamala that this has to be worked out fast. And it is screamingly obvious. It's in everyone's interest that we establish reciprocal free trade without tariffs. That would be much in everyone's interest. But if the European Union does want to charge us for access, they charge it through tariffs, which we would pay at the rate of most favoured nation status under WTO rules.
And why,
not some arbitrary charge.
And why, Mr. Cavallo, should you not do that? I mean, why should there be what Mr. Patterson describes as calls an arbitrary charge?
Well, first of all, in the first phase, it is no matter of arbitrarity. In this case, we have really concrete commitments that have been made. They are not just they do not just concern the programs that you mentioned. They also concern the EU funds as such, the cohesion policy, the agricultural policy, the legacy of our administrative staff, actually of the UK administrative staff in Brussels.
But we'd be leaving, for instance, the agricultural agreement. We would be leaving the CAP. That's the whole point.
Well, that's true, but this financial framework goes actually to 2020 and most of the commitments actually to 2023. So there is also quite an important amount of money that has to be settled. Maybe the UK will continue in those programs until 2023. This is possible, but there are not just the programs that we've talked about, not just technological or Erasmus issues. There are also issues of the current budget that concern much larger spectrum of activities.
Mr. President, if we can't get the deal sorted out in time, and very few people seem to think we can, the idea of a substantial transition period, maybe a couple of years, maybe a lot longer, what does that say to you? Are you happy with that?
No, I think we should have a settlement agreed, and there should be an implementation period which should be as brief as possible. But just to get back to...
Yeah, but if you can't get the agreement, that's what I'm saying, and this obviously is what the Chancellor of the Exchequer believes, that there is a strong possibility we're not going to get the kind of agreement we want. Therefore, there is going to have to be a long period of transition.
Well, no, not necessarily, because we trade with the rest of the world under WTO terms.
The rest of the world, yes,
and we would establish most favoured nation status. But all this discussion shows
we can't write off the European Union trade.
I didn't say we would.
Well,
we trade very happily with China and the United States and other major countries. We have a huge surplus with the United States of 39 billion, and that is all on WTO terms. So that is doable. But what it shows is that it's really good that David Davis is going there this morning, and substantial talks are starting, because it is massively interest of the European Union that we come up with a deal on reciprocal free trade.
All right.
And the other very relevant point of this, it's got to get back through Parliament, and Parliament has got to deliver the commitment to the British people to bring back control of laws and money. So this will be very relevant to any settlement. And Parliament does accept it.
Very quick thought from you, if I may, Mr. Kamal. This idea of a transition agreement, a transition arrangement, how long could it last for, and would it be acceptable to you and your colleagues?
Well, that is not a question that can be answered by a single member state or
but
EU
what do you
alone.
think? What's your view about a transition agreement?
Well, it is likely that there will be some kind of transition, but the quality, the spectrum of activities that we will be dealing during the transition is actually now open. Now we're still at the first phase, dealing with the legacy issues, and these will be open starting from October on.
All right. Thank you both very much.